All right, so prepping for 2025, huh? Smart move. And you're thinking about food security specifically if an EMP attack happens.
That's smart.
We took a deep dive into a Canadian preparedness guide. It's fascinating stuff.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, what's interesting about this one is
Wow.
it doesn't just like tell you to stockpile this and that.
Yeah.
It really explains why these particular items are so important.
Exactly. Yeah, and the why is so crucial, especially when we're talking about something like an EMP attack, right?
Right.
I think for a lot of people, EMPs sound like something out of sci-fi movie.
So yeah.
Can you break it down for us? Like, what is an EMP attack and why should we be taking it seriously?
Okay, so an EMP or electromagnetic pulse is basically a burst of energy that can really mess with
Mm.
or even completely destroy electronic circuits.
Wow.
Yeah, we're talking everything. Your phone, the power grid,
Oh.
possibly going dark.
Okay.
And when you think about our food system, transportation, communication, refrigeration,
Yeah.
all those things rely on electronics. So if
Understood.
those are gone,
That's where the problem comes in.
that's exactly it. And that's where this guide comes in. It's about creating a resilient pantry that can sustain you when those usual supply chains are disrupted.
So less about like doomsday prepping and more about creating a safety net.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, just in case the systems we rely on so heavily fail.
I like that. Okay, so let's get into the specifics of this 2025 stockpile.
Okay.
The guide lists 28 items. Some are expected and some are a little surprising.
Yeah, and the choices are really strategic.
Yeah.
You know, they took a strategic approach to this. It's not just about calories, it's about nutrition and shelf life, even like morale boosting factors.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, let's break it down by category. Why don't we start with carbohydrates?
Sure.
We've got the usual suspects: instant mashed potatoes, white rice, peanut butter.
Yeah, those are your long-lasting energy sources. Think of them as the foundation of your EMP pantry.
Okay.
They're calorie dense and can be stored for a really long time, which is obviously key here. But then the guide gets interesting.
Okay, like what?
They've got honey vinegar,
You wouldn't think of those.
right? Exactly.
Yeah.
Not your typical emergency supplies.
Yeah,
But think about it. Honey is a natural sweetener that never spoils.
that's true.
And vinegar, you can use it for so many things. Flavoring, preserving food, even cleaning.
Right. So it's really about thinking long term.
Yeah, and anticipating all kinds of needs.
Yeah. Now, what about some of the items that really surprised you?
Okay, so this is where it gets really interesting. Coconut oil, bouillon cubes, powdered cheese.
Those definitely don't scream survival food.
No, they don't.
Hmm.
But it's about making those long-lasting staples more palatable, enjoyable.
Makes sense.
Yeah, coconut oil is great for cooking, and it has immune-boosting properties. Bouillon cubes add flavor to simple dishes. And powdered cheese. Well, a little cheesy goodness can go a long way when you're eating shelf-stable meals for weeks.
Right. It's about the mental aspect, too,
Yeah, for sure.
of being in that situation for a long period of time.
Absolutely. And the guide recognizes that, I mean, they even include hard candies.
Really?
Yeah, just a little treat, a small morale boost can make
Yeah.
a big difference.
Okay, let's move on to protein sources. We've got the staples, canned fish beans, but then there's Spam. I
Spam.
haven't had that since I was a kid. What's the thought behind that?
Okay, let's be honest. Spam might not win any culinary awards,
Right.
but it lasts forever. It's packed with protein, and you can use it in a lot of different meals.
Yeah.
This guide isn't about gourmet dining. It's about practicality.
Yeah.
And making sure you have enough protein to stay healthy.
Right. And then we have lentils.
Oh, lentils are fantastic.
Yeah.
They're so versatile. They're a great source of protein and fiber, and you can use them in so many ways. Soups, stews, salads, even as a meat substitute.
Wow.
Yeah, they're a perfect example of what this guide is all about.
Mm.
Choosing ingredients that are adaptable.
I see. Okay, so we've covered carbs and protein. What about other essential nutrients?
Right.
The guide includes powdered eggs and milk.
Yeah, I know they don't sound very appealing,
Not really.
but they're nutritional powerhouses. Powdered milk gives you the calcium and vitamin D, and powdered eggs can be used for baking and even scrambled.
Mm-hmm.
And think about it. Powdered forms take up way less space.
Then fresh.
Exactly, which is really important when you're building a stockpile.
Right. Okay, so practicality is key here.
Yeah.
What about the other items? Oats, pasta, ghee butter.
These round out your pantry with versatility and longevity. Oats are great for fiber, and you can use them for breakfast or baking. Pasta is a flexible base for different sauces and dishes, and ghee butter, or clarified butter, has a long shelf life and is perfect for high-heat cooking.
And then, of course, we have canned stew.
Oh, yes. A complete ready-to-eat meal in a can. It's about convenience and minimizing cooking time.
Right.
especially if you're dealing with limited resources.
And canned vegetables.
Yes, crucial for getting those vitamins and minerals.
Right. And we've got ramen,
Okay,
a
run.
college student staple.
Right.
But seriously, it is versatile and comforting.
And it cooks quickly, which is important if you have limited resources.
Good point. Okay, and to round out the list, we have salt cornmeal crackers.
Those are the essentials. Salt, obviously, for flavor and preservation. Cornmeal is another versatile grain for baking or thickening stews. And crackers are great for snacks or as a base for other ingredients.
It's amazing how much thought goes into this.
I know. It's really impressive.
Yeah, building a resilient pantry that can sustain you for the long haul.
Right. And this is just the food part.
Right. There's a lot more to consider.
Oh, yeah. When it comes to facing a potential EMP attack.
So speaking of which, the guide also stresses the importance of a comprehensive family preparedness plan,
Absolutely.
including things like emergency communication strategies.
Right, because in an EMP scenario, you can't rely on your cell phone or the internet or even landlines.
Right.
Those could all be gone.
Yeah.
So having backup plans like two-way radios or designated meeting points is really critical.
And creating an emergency contact list.
Yeah, absolutely crucial. Imagine needing to connect with loved ones when traditional methods are down. That list could be a lifeline.
And establishing those safe meeting points.
Right, just in case you're separated during an emergency. It reduces chaos and makes sure everyone knows where to go if you can't communicate.
So having a well-stocked pantry is vital.
It is.
But it's just one part of a much larger preparedness picture.
Exactly. It's about thinking holistically and anticipating a whole range of potential challenges.
This has been incredibly insightful.
It's a fascinating topic.
It is. Before we move on, I want to touch on one more thing. Proper storage and rotation techniques.
Well, that's so important.
Because what's the point of having all this food if it goes bad before you can use it?
Exactly. This is where the details really matter. These details are crucial for maintaining a long-lasting, usable stockpile.
Okay, so let's dive into the nitty-gritty of keeping our EMP stockpile fresh and organized. What are some general guidelines for storing these types of food items?
Okay, golden rule. Think cool, dark, and dry. Imagine you're creating a mini bunker for your supplies.
Okay, so avoiding direct sunlight and humidity.
Exactly. And temperature is really important. Aim for a storage temperature between 50 and 7 degrees Fahrenheit. A basement, a cool pantry, anywhere that avoids extreme temperature changes.
Okay. What about airtight containers? Are those necessary for everything?
Airtight containers are your best friend for long-term storage.
Okay.
They keep out moisture pests, air, all the things that can degrade your food over time.
So glass jars, plastic containers with tight lids, even vacuum sealing systems?
All good options.
Yeah.
And don't forget to label. Clearly mark each container with what's inside and the date you stored it. That's really important for the next step rotation.
Right, rotation. What's the significance of that and how do we do it effectively?
Rotation is all about using the oldest items first and replacing them with newer ones. First in, first out.
Got it.
It makes sure that you're actually using your stockpile so you're minimizing waste and you're consistently checking for any damage or spoilage.
So it's not just stockpiling, it's actively managing and maintaining.
Exactly. A well-maintained stockpile is a reliable stockpile. One trick for rotation is to use a shelf or bin system. Designate areas for different types of food, canned goods, grains, snacks. As you replenish your stock, put new items behind the older ones. That keeps the oldest at the front, ready to be used.
That's a great organizational tip.
It is. It's easy to get overwhelmed of all of this, but having a system makes it much more manageable.
Right. A well-organized pantry is a happy pantry.
Exactly. Especially in a stressful situation.
Any other organizational tips to keep our EMP pantries running smoothly?
Yeah, clear containers are a game changer.
Oh, yeah.
You can see your inventory at a glance without having to open everything.
Cool.
Also consider shelf risers or stackable bins to maximize space. It's about working smarter, not harder.
I love that. This is fantastic. I'm already feeling inspired to go revamp my own pantry.
I love it.
Yeah.
Remember, preparedness is an ongoing journey. It's not about being perfect. It's about taking those small, consistent steps to build resilience and have peace of mind.
I like that.
Yeah.
This has been incredibly informative. We've covered so much understanding the threat of an EMP, building a resilient pantry, and maintaining it for the long haul.
It's a lot to take in.
But we're just getting started.
Oh.
So we covered the EMP pantry, and now let's talk about something just as important, water.
Yeah. Water. It's something we take for granted.
Totally. But in an EMP scenario where our usual infrastructure is down, access to safe drinking water, that becomes like the most important thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the Canadian guide we're looking at today has some really practical advice on this.
Oh, good.
Yeah, it emphasizes a multi-layered approach to water security.
Okay, I like it.
Hmm.
So breaking it down, starting with stockpiling, what's the recommended amount of water to have on hand?
Okay, so the guide suggests at least 1 gallon of water per person per day.
Okay.
That's just for drinking and basic hydration.
Oh.
Ideally, you'd want enough to last at least 3 days, if not longer.
So if you have a family of 4, you're looking at 12 gallons for a 3-day supply. That's a lot of water.
It is.
Yeah.
And it shows you how important planning ahead is. They recommend storing it in cool, dark places and using food-grade containers that are made for storing water.
Okay, good tips.
Yeah, avoid using old milk jugs or containers that might leach chemicals into the water.
That's a good point. Now, a gallon per person per day, that's just for drinking. What about cooking, cleaning, all of those other things?
Right. Those are super important too. The guide recommends storing additional water specifically for those things, like larger containers, 5-gallon jugs, even a water barrel if you have the space.
Okay, that makes sense. But storing that much water can be a challenge, especially if you don't have a lot of space.
Totally. And that's where water purification methods come in,
Right.
having multiple options available.
So a backup for your backup plan. What are some of the methods they recommend?
Boiling is a reliable method as long as you have fuel for heating.
Okay.
The guide also recommends water purification tablets. Those are small and easy to store.
Those are good for if you need to leave quickly.
Exactly. And for a more long-term solution, they suggest a portable water filter.
Oh, yeah, I've seen those advertised. What should we look for in a good water filter?
They talk about different types of filters. But the most important thing is making sure it's designed to remove a wide range of contaminants, like bacteria, viruses, and parasites.
Okay, so it's about having that redundancy, right?
Right.
Making sure you have safe water no matter what happens.
Exactly.
What about people who have well water? It seems like that would be a reliable source if there's an EMP. Does the guide talk about that?
They do. They mention well water can be valuable,
Uh-huh.
but they say it's not a guaranteed solution.
Why is that? Wouldn't well water be fine if there's no power?
The well itself might be fine. The problem is accessing it. A lot of wells need electric pumps to get the water to the surface. If the power is out, you might not be able to get to your water.
Right, so you'd need a manual hand pump or something.
Yeah, exactly. Something that doesn't need electricity. The guide even suggests thinking about other water sources, like collecting rainwater or finding natural springs in your area.
That's smart, thinking outside the box. Okay, so we've got stockpiling purification alternative sources. What about storing the water we do have?
They really emphasize using food-grade containers, storing it in a cool, dark place, and they recommend rotating your water supply every 6 months.
Every 6 months.
Yeah, it might seem like a lot, but water quality can go down even in storage.
Right. So it's like rotating your food, make sure it's fresh.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Minimize waste. Now let's talk about something else. We've talked about food and water, but there are other essential items we need to consider for an EMP.
Right. The guide calls it a non-food essentials kit. It's basically a collection of items that would be important in any emergency, not just an EMP.
Right, and it covers a lot of different needs, from first aid to hygiene to communication, even basic tools.
Okay, so what are some of the must-have items?
Well, they start with the basics. A good first aid kit, bandages, antiseptics, pain relievers, gauze, all that. And don't forget personal medications.
That's important. You should always have a good first aid kit.
Absolutely. But it's even more important in an emergency when you might not be able to get medical help.
Right. You might need to take care of yourself for a while. Okay, what else is in this kit?
Hygiene items. Soap, toothpaste, toilet paper, feminine hygiene products. The things we use every day.
Right. It's about staying clean and healthy.
Exactly. And to stay comfortable, they also recommend blankets, warm clothing, even some comfort items like books or games, especially for kids.
It's important to think about the mental and emotional side of things, too.
Yeah, for sure. And don't forget basic tools. A multi-tool duct tape, a flashlight with extra batteries. These can be super useful for making repairs, securing your home, or just seeing in the dark.
Sounds like a well-rounded survival kit.
It is. And they also recommend having some cash on hand.
Oh, right, because ATMs and credit cards might not work.
Exactly. And keeping copies of important documents in a waterproof container, driver's license, insurance cards, medical records, anything you might need.
So it's about being ready for anything.
Right, from evacuating your home to a long-term power outage.
This is a lot to think about.
It is. They also emphasize having a communication plan.
Right, so you can stay in touch with people.
Exactly. So if cell phones are down, they recommend other options. A weather radio, a ham radio if you know how to use one,
Right.
or just prearranged meeting places where you can check in with each other.
Okay, so to recap, the non-food essentials kit includes first aid, hygiene, comfort items, tools, cash, important documents, and communication devices. That's a lot.
It is,
Yeah.
but it shows you how important it is to personalize your preparedness based on your own needs.
Mhm.
If you have kids, you might need diapers, wipes, formula. And if you have pets, you'll need to think about their needs too.
That's a good point. It's not one size fits all.
No, it's about figuring out your own situation and planning accordingly.
Well, this has been really helpful, but I think it's important to acknowledge that all this prepping talk can be overwhelming, especially if you're just starting out.
I agree. It's easy to get caught up in what could happen and feel like you need to have everything figured out right now.
So what advice would you give someone who's feeling overwhelmed about preparing for an EMP or any emergency?
Start small. You don't have to do it all at once. Just pick one thing you can do today. Add a few cans of food to your pantry, fill up a couple of water jugs, put together a basic first aid kit.
Little by little.
Exactly. And try to focus on the good things about being prepared. It's not about being afraid. It's about feeling empowered and self-reliant. Knowing you're ready for anything can give you peace of mind.
It's about taking control instead of feeling helpless.
Exactly. And it's about being resilient, both as individuals and as a community.
This has been a great conversation. I know our listeners are feeling more prepared already, but we're not done yet. We have one more segment where we'll talk about the mental and emotional side of preparedness. How do we prepare our minds, not just our pantries? We'll talk about that when we come back.
Okay, so we talked about food, we talked about water, we talked about all the gear, but now I want to talk about something just as important as all of that.
Our minds, right?
Exactly, the mental and emotional side of all this. Yeah, this is where it gets really interesting, because we can have all the supplies in the world, but if we're not mentally and emotionally prepared for an emergency, it's not going to do us much good.
Right. Because an EMP attack or any kind of major disruption, it's going to be stressful.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So how do we prepare our minds for something so unpredictable and potentially traumatic?
You know, the Canadian Guide we've been talking about, they actually touch on this, and it's something that I found really helpful.
Yeah.
It's all about shifting our mindset
Okay.
from fear and anxiety to a sense of empowerment and self-reliance.
So it's not about pretending that nothing bad will happen. It's about being ready to deal with it when it does.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about acknowledging that things could happen, but not letting that fear control us. Instead, we can focus on what we can control, our knowledge, our skills, our preparedness.
So the actual physical preparations, like stocking up on food, purifying water, having the right gear, those become like a way to show this mental shift.
I like that. Yeah, it's like a physical manifestation of that mental shift.
Right.
And even the act of preparing can be empowering in itself.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Because it gives us a sense of control in a situation that might feel very out of control.
That makes a lot of sense. And that sense of control can really change how we react to an emergency.
For sure. When we feel helpless, we tend to freeze up or make bad decisions. But when we feel prepared, we're more likely to stay calm, think clearly, and take action.
So how do we cultivate this mental resilience? Are there any specific techniques or practices we can use to get our minds ready for a potential emergency?
Well, the guide actually offers some really good suggestions. It emphasizes mindfulness and meditation.
Those are becoming really popular, even for people who aren't prepping.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah?
So how do they help in an emergency? Well, mindfulness is all about staying present, focusing on what's happening right now,
Okay.
instead of getting caught up in what might happen in the future or dwelling on the past.
Right.
And in a crisis, that ability to stay grounded and focused, that's invaluable.
Right. It stops us from getting overwhelmed.
Exactly. And meditation can help us control our emotions, reduce stress, and develop a sense of inner peace. All really important when you're facing a crisis.
The guide also talks about connecting with our communities and building relationships.
Oh, that's so important. Because in a real crisis, we need each other. Having those strong bonds with our community gives us a sense of belonging, support, and purpose.
Right. It's like we're all in this together.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And those connections can be so powerful when things get tough.
And don't forget the importance of humor.
Oh, absolutely. Laughter is the best medicine, they say.
Right.
Even during a crisis. Finding something to laugh about, sharing a joke with someone you love, it can really help.
They can help us stay positive.
It can. It releases tension, helps us keep things in perspective, and reminds us that there's still hope.
So basically, preparing our minds is just as important as prepping our homes.
Exactly. It's about building that resilience, embracing self-reliance, connecting with our community, and remembering to find those moments of joy even amidst chaos.
Well, this has been an incredible deep dive into EMP preparedness. We've talked about the practical steps, food, water supplies, But we've also explored the mental and emotional side of being prepared, building mental resilience, finding strength in our communities.
It's all connected.
It really is, and we've covered a lot. But remember, preparedness is an ongoing process. It never really ends.
So true.
It's about constantly learning and adapting and improving our skills to face whatever comes our way.
Well said. Preparedness isn't just about surviving. It's about thriving no matter what.
I love that. And on that note, I think we're going to wrap up this episode of the Deep Dive. We encourage you to keep learning about EMP preparedness and other aspects of emergency preparedness that you're interested in. Talk to people in your community, share what you know, and keep that learning going.
Remember, being prepared isn't about living in fear. It's about taking control and building a better future for ourselves and our communities.
Until next time, stay curious, stay prepared, and stay connected.